Okay, just waiting for the last few people to connect. And we're good to go. So now we've got a presentation from Josie Whiteley from Jaw Communication. And I will just play your video now. There we go.
Hello, my name is Josie Whiteley of Jaw Communication, and I've created a short video to share with you about connection and communication and why they matter. It's an area that comes up regularly when I'm delivering training sessions in areas such as leadership, management, self-development and well-being. And my business name developed out of my belief in the vital importance of communication in probably every transaction we ever carry out. It's particularly pertinent at the moment now being March 2021, which is exactly a year since much of the world went into the first lockdown in a bid to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. We now know we underestimated the scale of the challenge, and millions of people across the planet have been hugely affected. So in the context of a global pandemic, what have we learned over the last 12 months? I think most people have actually realised the value and importance of relationships with family, with friends, with work colleagues, and many people have struggled with many things during this period, including loneliness. We've also come to value other relationships, such as those we have our local delivery driver, or our postie, or teachers or carers that are involved in helping us and supporting us, people like volunteers running food banks. And of course, all of those working and volunteering in our incredible NHS. As we celebrate the arrival of spring with its longer days and lovely warmer weather and flowers, trees and animals waking up to the new season, perhaps it's a time for us all to wake up to actually what matters in the world. Now, obviously, that's a ginormous subject. So for now, I'm going to focus on our relationships with those around us, because they're central to all of our communities and they're built through connection and communication. So let's consider why these skills are so important. So what do I actually mean by connection? Well, it could be an emotional connection to a family member or a good friend, or it could be a financial connection through the wage you earn from your job. And of course, your job may well lead to other connections through your friends made there, with your colleagues, your managers, your customers and clients, and so on. It could be a service type connection with an unknown person, such as a delivery driver who brings your supermarket shopping to your door every week. I wonder how many of us have had a longer conversation than perhaps you might normally have had with that delivery driver. What we've experienced during these last 12 months has made realise the importance of all of these kinds of connections. And the pandemic has also helped to highlight the impact we suffer as a result of a reduction or a loss of these connections. There are psychological effects stemming from loneliness and the constraints placed upon us when we've not been able to see friends, for example, or to visit relatives in care homes or comfort those in hospital. And children have been affected by this. They've been missing family members who they haven't been able to visit and their friends from school. The physical effects too can be quite profound. So when was the last time you were able to hug somebody who wasn't in your immediate bubble? Hugs have really come to the forefront, haven't they, in a lot of the reporting of the pandemic, because physical contact is so important to most creatures. Imagine that humans are one of the most expressive species when it comes to giving someone a hug, a pat on the back, or maybe just holding their hand. And if a picture paints 1,000 words, I think maybe a hug is worth 10,000 at this time. I also wonder whether, if like me, those of you with pets have really enjoyed the value of having a loving pet to give an extra hug to when you haven't been able to hug a person. Some people, of course, have suffered from not being able to attend a normal gym or dance class, and they feel that their physical health has deteriorated over the last year due to lack of exercise and maybe overindulgence in food and drink to try to compensate for something that's in. We shouldn't underestimate the pleasure we experience from spending time with like-minded people in an enjoyable and shared activity. I suspect we've probably all felt some of these things to some degree as our normal so changed dramatically. And some of those people, of course, that we think about who've carried on working through the pandemic have actually been on the front line and at risk every day in their working environment, such as NHS staff, carers, those working in schools. They've all played a significant part in helping and supporting the rest of us. And I think that's arisen due to their connection that they've got with members of society through their role. I do know quite a few carers and teachers, assistants, nurses. They're not usually in the job for the money. They very often choose that role because they want to be of service to others, and they clearly feel a real connection and a duty to other members of society through the role they undertake. Even if some of us don't feel those kinds of connections, we do all have special connections at various points in our lives with another person, and that could be our partner, husband, wife, children, close friends, our pets, as I've already mentioned. And sometimes there's a special spark. All those feelings in the early days of a special relationship, or that feeling you get with a friend when you just clicked when you first met. One of the areas I'd like to think about where friendships might not come so easily is in the workplace, and that can really be another matter, because you often don't get to choose your work colleagues. However, please don't feel that all is lost if you dislike your boss or a colleague, because you can build a connection with them. It just takes a little more time, and it's more difficult than if it's with a person that you have a natural affinity with. If you do take the time to get to know them and know a little about their family or their interests, then this allows you to have a brief, polite conversation where you can show genuine interest in them and learn a little about what makes them tick. So just accept that you're never likely to be best buddies, but understand that a harmonious work atmosphere is so much better than an unpleasant one. For those of you who've been working remotely over this last year, think about those work relationships and the levels of connection that you've had. Has it helped or hindered you in productivity in your job, and has the connection been more difficult online? Remember that connection doesn't have to be the all singing, all dancing, sparks flying kind at all, and it can be developed, you can work at it, and it can be improved, especially to make your work life feel less stressful. And who doesn't that? I've just reopened this connection slide because there are a number of images on here, and they're representing the different kinds of connection I'm talking about. So you can see a group of people in the middle of the screen representing your colleagues, people at your workplace, maybe your customers, your clients. You can see a hoverfly and a flower and an image of our world. Might be better if I move my screen out of the way and you can see the world even better then. I thought we should also consider our personal connections with nature and with our planet because, well, it's important. And the great outdoors actually has been a real positive for many during these strange times. So we really shouldn't ignore our connection with the planet and nature. I am very fortunate because I have a garden, and I am very aware of nature because I live with a wildlife expert. But it's been really good to see and hear others embracing their gardens as never before. And for those in towns and cities, then parks and other green spaces have been a real blessing during this time. I'm sure, like me, you've seen examples on TV of families who perhaps live in tower blocks who have been nurturing plants on tiny balconies, for example. And I'm really hopeful that for some, the whole experience will help them to develop an awareness of and a relationship with nature and our planet, to allow them to develop a really deep and meaningful connection with nature. This image in the bottom left, of course, is our Earth, and it also features two hands, one handing the world over to another. And of course, that's what happens in reality between our generations. We're all here for a very fleeting time, and we pass the world on to others. If we have an improved connection relationship with our planet and how we treat it, then that can only be a good thing. So now let's look at my 10 top tips for quality connection. Again, a beautiful image in my favourite colours, illustrating that connection worldwide. Firstly, a genuine interest in others. If you're not interested in others, at least make an effort to try to be, because that's what's going to help you develop relationships and turn them into something really, really positive. We talked about your relationship with work colleagues or perhaps your manager. Again, if you haven't got a genuine interest in them, you need to try to cultivate that so that it becomes a supportive relationship and helps you in your work life. That will reduce stress, of course, if you're able to do that. Actively listening to learn from others and what they're saying, showing a genuine interest in them, listening to what they have to say, valuing what they have to say, and working hard to actually hear what they say. So the idea of listening and hearing, they're not the same thing. Actually hearing, understanding, and taking on board what other people are saying to you, their views and opinions, is a really good way to build a strong and meaningful connection. I do think the next 2 points, honesty and being your authentic self, are really, really important, because whilst I've suggested you may have to work at having a genuine interest in others, that doesn't mean that that's being dishonest. It means actually that you're honestly trying to have a better and a stronger and a more effective relationship. By honesty here in this context, I mean to be trustworthy, so that people know where you're coming from, they understand you, they get you, and they know that when you say something to them, it's not a pack of lies. So be your authentic and your true self, behave honestly and with integrity, give people your time. A way to build connection is not, oh, I'm really sorry, I can't speak now, I've got to go on the internet, I've got to go and Google something, oh, I've got to do some research, oh, I've got to go and do this, I've got to go and do that. Give people your time, because your time's precious. As I've already said, your time on this planet is very short. So this idea of, well, I'll do it tomorrow. Well, tomorrow might never come. And certainly millions of people worldwide in this pandemic have experienced exactly that and have left families behind who are mourning because they didn't get that chance to have that last conversation, for example. So give people your time, make time in your day to spend with the people that matter to you. Don't think, oh, it'll happen next week or next month, because you might never get there, or they might never get there. Show empathy. This is the same as sympathy. Empathy is about being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes to actually understand how they're thinking, how they're feeling, what they're enduring. And if you have empathy and you do show a degree of understanding of what they're going through, then that's how you can help and support them, and that will be appreciated. Others will be grateful for that help and support. If you're a manager, for example, the very fact that you can show empathy to the people that you employ and support them, they need time off to rush to hospital, to visit a sick relative, for example, that will be really valued. And it will help to strengthen connections that you have with that individual. The final three on my list, being grateful, that's something I think that we perhaps forget about. You know, we should be grateful for all the good things we have in our lives. And one of the good things in our lives is the people that are in it, that we work with, that we live with, that we spend time with. Be grateful for that time that others give to you and enjoy it. Be grateful for the work they do for you. If you employ them, yes, you're paying them, but actually be grateful for their skills and expertise and the fact that they've chosen to come and work for you and share those skills. Treating others as you wish to be treated. I would hope that this is just a given, but sadly it often isn't. And in some toxic workplaces, it's absolutely the opposite. So if you've always got that in your mind about building connections, friendships, relationships with others, treat them as you would want to be treated. And sometimes if you're going to say something harshly, for example, just pause, take a breath and think, would I like it if they spoke to me like that? And if the answer is no, then don't do it. And smile. Smiles are always good, as long as, going back to the idea of being your authentic self, as long as they're genuine. Sometimes people might have a nervous smile, but actually just that attempt to make a human connection on a very, very basic level, a smile can really, really effective in doing that. So we've talked briefly about connecting with others. We've talked about connecting with nature and with the planet. You might have noticed in the last but one slide, I'd put a photograph of myself on there. And I did that purposely because I think it's important that we acknowledge the connection that we have with ourselves, because our physical and mental health and well-being are reliant on the relationship that we have with ourselves and how we feel about who we are. So, do you listen to your gut feeling? Do you trust it? If it tells you not to do something because it makes you feel uncomfortable, do you take any notice, or do you just ignore it completely? How do you communicate with yourself inside your head? Self-talk can be really, really helpful, and it can be a really positive thing, but it can also be hugely damaging. Clearly, it's dependent on what you say. So do you talk to yourself in a supportive way? Do you feel that you're important enough to be listened to? Or do you suffer from a personal imposter syndrome where you feel worthless? Do you follow the 10 tips that we've just talked about when you're listening to your own thoughts? So we all need to think about that connection with ourselves for a number of significant reasons. And one of those reasons is that our connection with ourselves also impacts on how we communicate with others. Most of the workshops and training I deliver are around communication, which with the advent of the internet and social media networks has become a whole lot more complicated in recent years. I thought the interconnectivity across the planet was beautifully illustrated by this image. Once you post on social media, it's there forevermore. All someone has to do is to take a screenshot, and you can find yourself being investigated by the police or being sacked from your job because of an inappropriate comment on Twitter. And the way that individuals ensure they don't fall foul of this is to take care, of course, when communicating online. And a key part of all the sessions that I do is around an individual's personal values and beliefs, which guide and support them in these decisions. So, of course, we can't consider those specifically via this video, but it's certainly worth thinking about your values and belief system to understand where they come from and why you might have particular views. And this is important if you want to change any of your behaviours or address areas of difficulty. So if we think about the link between connection and communication, we realise the two are completely intertwined all the time. How you communicate with others has an impact on every kind of connection you ever have in every single relationship. And if you've built a strong connection, but you communicate something really badly, the relationship can be damaged or could be even destroyed completely. Of course, ways that we communicate socially at the moment have been completely off limits for quite some time. But think about the modern way, the pandemic way to communicate. And I can honestly say that right now, I cannot imagine life without Zoom. The image that we've just seen illustrates the advantages of platforms such as Zoom or the platform that you're viewing this video on, because you can literally connect with millions of other people worldwide. I'm self-employed, and most of the work I had lined up a year ago disappeared virtually overnight. Millions of other people experience the same thing, and we've discovered that technology has been a real lifesaver for many. It's been significant in work relationships, but also within personal relationships. So because I'm in my elderly father's bubble, I was able to cook his Christmas dinner and deliver it this year, and he was able to see and to chat to other family members live via my tablet. And for people able to access the various technology and social networking sites, it's been relatively easy to keep in touch across whatever distance. But it hasn't been the same, has it? And I'd much rather have been able to celebrate a family Christmas with all of us in the South. And I would much rather have been able to deliver my workshops at conferences with real live people actually present in the room. It's easier. So much easier to present a really great session when you are in that room, because you can put on the atmosphere, you can see the body language of your audience as a whole, and you can interact with them as required. So we also need to consider the effectiveness of the method of communication if it's Zoom, for example, because the method you're using can affect what is actually communicated. So think of simple things such as the standard of the Wi-Fi signal that you're using. Is it reliable? Let's also think about listening, because we've talked about listening being an important skill. I've been on loads of different virtual meetings and conversations where listening has not exactly been obvious sometimes. You can have 2 or 3 people speaking at once. There might be a time lag in the connection, and then the message becomes distorted on its way from the source to the receiver. So if you think about it, the word not is a very small word, but it could easily be missed during a quick conversation with a dodgy Wi-Fi connection. And then, of course, there could be real complications as a result of that. I've mentioned active listening, particularly online. This can be quite exhausting, and the listener can lose focus. And as soon as that happens, part of the message being communicated is lost. And I'm trying that out a little now because we haven't had a change of scene on the screen. We haven't had another slide appear. So now you're just listening to me and you just see my image on the screen. Are you able to actively listen and to concentrate and hear what I'm saying? What about the non-verbal communication as well that happens in every single interaction that we have? Because it's much easier in real life to notice facial expressions, for example, the amount of eye contact. Tone of voice can be hard to judge online. Breathing, body posture, and movement, these can all be really difficult to see accurately, especially when your screen keeps freezing. So whether you're communicating online or in person, the kind of relationship that you have with the person and your level of connection with them can be a huge help, particularly at a time when you might need clarification. If, for example, you're being talked to by your boss, then you might be nervous and you might be too worried to ask for clarification. You might feel you'd look stupid or disrespectful or incompetent, or actually as if you couldn't be bothered to listen to them properly when they were speaking. Any of these fears will affect your response. You might decide that you don't want to ask questions, and then of course that can lead to worse problems because you could make mistakes because you haven't checked. And in extreme circumstances, you might lose your job. So a relationship with the individual who is your line manager and a lack of any kind of personal connection can be seriously damaging because it can make effective communication difficult, if not impossible. Of course, if you're talking with a good friend and there's something you don't understand, you probably won't take to ask for clarification. And then there's no misunderstanding, no mistake, and no problem. So think about all the people that you communicate with regularly. How often do you have problems in communication with family members or friends or work colleagues? And are you able to spot patterns in the causes for communication breakdown? That's something for you to think about later, probably, to your own behaviours and your own reactions, as well as that of others. And to see if you can spot patterns in your behaviours and the reactions it elicits in others, because that can be hugely helpful in avoiding future conflicts. So let's now move on to my 10 top tips for quality communication. You may notice as you look at them, and by the way, they're in no particular order, which was also true of the 10 top tips for connection. You might notice that 3 of them make a reappearance on here. There's actively listen, there's honesty, and there's smile on there. The other 7 are a little different. And I think the key when communication is considered is to use your head and your heart together, which is the purpose of the illustration on the slide. If you focus on just your head and thinking about things logically without any kind of passion at all, then you might come up with a harsher way of communicating. If you are all in where your heart's concerned and that's how you're approaching any communication or any issue that you're discussing, then the chances are you could be taken advantage of, or you could make a rash decision because you're not actually engaging your brain as well. So the little seesaw on that diagram is exactly where you need to be. You need to be half heart, half head, have them working together to be the better you can be in any form of communication. The first point on here is clarity of information, and that's for if you are the person communicating the information. Keep it short, keep it sweet, keep it clear, keep it accurate, use accurate language for what you're trying to describe so that nothing can be misconstrued. And the second point, actively listen if you're the person you're receiving that information. If two people are communicating and there's clarity of information and active listening going on, then there should be absolutely no need at all for anything to be misunderstood. At the end of the communication that's happening, check your understanding if necessary. If you're a little bit confused about something that's been said, or if you are certain that you understood it, but you just want to double check, better to do that than to go away and make an error. We have honesty on there as well, as we mentioned earlier, and the idea of being respectful to others. Now, you may disagree with what they're saying. There are quite a number of times I can think of in my professional career and in my personal life where I have strongly disagreed with what the person I'm communicating with is saying. But that's not an excuse to be disrespectful. I would always advocate treating people as you wish to be treated. And if you don't want somebody to ever be disrespectful to you, then don't dish that out to others. Your tone of voice and your gestures are really, really important. Consider your body language. So, for example, now, it's a little different on a camera because my camera is away from my computer and I keep having to look at it and I keep forgetting. So you might be thinking, wow, there's not much eye contact going on here, and that's just the positioning of my camera. I tend to wave my arms around a lot. In my 20 years of teaching, my students used to pick me up on that quite regularly and would sometimes tell me how distracting it was, which is one of the reasons I have the camera quite close, so you can see less of my hands waving around. So think about your tone of voice, your gestures and your body language in any communication that you're undertaking. Number 9 is a really important one, linked in with emotional intelligence. It's the one that I've been working for 30 years, more than 30 years actually now, and it's the one that even now I'm not great at. When you know where your areas for improvement or your weaknesses, areas for development, whatever you want to call them, when you know where they are, you can be aware of them and you can work on them. So there are times when I could get emotionally involved far too much in a form of communication about a particular issue, and I have to remind myself to come back, distance myself from the emotion and bring my head back on board and use my brain rather than my heart in any communication that I might be having in something that I find very emotive. And finally, smile. Why not? What is there to lose? If you've got a frown on your face all the time, what you're doing is you're giving out bad vibes to that other person. They look at your facial expression, they think this person doesn't like me, they don't want to spend time talking to me, what they're telling me is not trustworthy. Smile. Make sure your eyes are smiling as well, because if they're not, then that comes across as perhaps being dishonest. Certainly not authentic. I have no idea. You see, I love that image of the world of the internet, and it obviously wanted to make another appearance. I have no idea why it did that. So let me just stop sharing. So we've come to the end of my little presentation, and I hope that my thoughts have been of interest and have maybe sparked some ideas as to ways you might improve your connection, your communication skills. For those of you who have been watching this video as part of the live Celebrating Spring event, I'll see you very, very shortly for some more discussion around this subject. For anybody else who's watching and listening, if you're interested in finding out about my workshops, about my coaching offer, or in joining any of my online courses, please do have a look at my website. You can see it on the screen now. It's jawcommunication.co.uk, where you'll find all my contact details. I do hope you've enjoyed this session, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Josie.
You're
That's
welcome.
great.
I enjoyed that. It was very easy just sitting and listening to it.
You'll have been able to check in the chat box then. There's been quite a lot of conversation going on, probably the most communication throughout the whole of the event.
Well, that's because cats were involved.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
My cat even made an appearance on my Twitter this morning because he was fast asleep listening to Catherine's beautiful playing and singing. So, yeah, I think that's why pets, people have an affinity, or a lot of people have an affinity with pets, don't they?
Definitely.
And they're a fabulous thing for breaking down barriers. I was just interested actually in what Sharon's written, because I think she's on next, and she was talking, have I read it right, about you bringing all of this together, Rachel?
Yes. Yeah.
The comments have gone through so quickly now, but that's right, she's going to speak about it next. This feeling about you coordinating the magic. I mean, I've been to all the sessions this weekend, and I'm blown away by that connection and some of the similarities in the things that we're talking about, but often from different perspectives or different levels of expertise and different kinds of expertise. And I'm finding that really enjoyable. And I've learned something from every presenter.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's really interesting as well because it validates what you're saying, because you hear other people saying it and you think, especially if it's something that you're passionate about and that you feel like you've not come up with, but that you're presenting in a certain way. And when you hear other people saying that, and it's like, yeah, I've got this right, definitely. Yeah.
I think one of the concerns I've had, I mean, I've worked for about 35 years and a lot of that time's been in education. And communication, because I'm a journalist before that. And sometimes with my online courses I've devised, I'm a little bit unsure because I think surely everybody knows this. And then I'll go to a conference and I'll deliver a workshop to 100 people and they're all going quite highly qualified, we're high level, and they're all going, oh, I never thought of it like that. Exactly. Oh, that's really great. And I sometimes assume, and my mum used to say to me as a young woman, as a child even, never assume. And it's taken me a while to pick up on that and learn that lesson, because just because I know it doesn't mean that everybody else does. And just the same as I've listened to all these presenters this week and I've learned something from everybody, and I wonder if they're thinking the same and making an assumption that we all know it, and actually we don't.
I think we might know it, we just forget, or we don't see it as being important.
Well, absolutely. Yes. Or we don't like it. I talked about listening and hearing.
Yeah.
And that's been a skill I've really had to learn because I just talk all the time.
I've written that down, actually. Listening.
Well, that I talk all the time.
No, listening and hearing. That's one of the things that I picked up on, because they are two very, very different things, aren't they? And some people just can't listen at all, and they're waiting to jump in over what you've got to say. Some people listen but don't take it in, and some people really hear, and you think they're not engaged until they come back later and say, no, when you said this, and you think, wow, I didn't even think you were listening to me.
I started quite recently attending something, I think it was devised by Nancy Klein. I'm not an expert on it at all. It's called the Thinking Room Environment, or the Thinking Environment. And it's been a thing been put together online by further education practitioners. And you're there for an hour, and literally you're not allowed to interrupt when somebody's speaking. There is no interruption, and the facilitator will prevent any interruption happening. And then you are all expected in turn to make a comment or ask a question. Or it's really hard.
I can imagine, yeah.
It's really hard. And learning the skill to not just be thinking, what am I going to say, and then jumping in and interrupting. Actually hearing what everybody says in that, and it's been done on Zoom, in that virtual room, and making yourself listen so you then can, in your turn, respond appropriately and intelligently. It's really quite challenging. And after an hour, you feel a bit like you've done a marathon. And each week I've taken part in it, I've got better at it, because, of course, like everything, the practice, as anything, the better you get.
Yeah.
But that's been one of my assuming things, and definitely not hearing. And of course sometimes in the hearing it isn't the words as well, because people be saying something and actually what they're saying is not what they're trying to express to you. And that's where some of those, we're doing it now, look, the gestures and the body language and the eye contact and those things come in as well, and you need to learn to understand those. There's some comments actually in the chat.
listening like a rock. Yeah, listen to understand, listen to respond. Yes, it's that thing about listening to respond. If you're listening to respond, you're not actually listening at all. No. You're just wanting to get your own point across.
Yeah.
Some others know it is something to get across. We hear different things in different ways from different people. Absolutely, yes, that is very true. Yeah, we do.
I've noticed that Louise is sticking up for the heart, saying it's not just emotional, it does have deep wisdom in relation to the subtle realms of the world, like a level deeper than the emotions. That is absolutely true. And I talked when I did my session yesterday about the difference between thoughts and feelings, and the fact that communicating thoughts and knowledge is so much easier than communicating your feelings and emotions. And I think that's really important, because your heart, I think when I spoke to Louise earlier, I think that sometimes that when you're thinking about the way your heart is behaving, takes a little bit longer to understand it, and sometimes it's easier to just let the thoughts drop out of your head and out of your mouth, and processing feelings takes a little bit longer, which is why the pausing and the relaxing in between holding a conversation is good.
I can see Louisa's comment now about the sticking up a little for the heart.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely, I do get that. And I think sometimes, particularly in business, I was a senior manager for a lot of years before I saw the light and decided to join the world of the self-employed and be able to have more control over what I want to do, I choose to do. Because when you're employed, often you don't have a choice, do you? You're just expected to do whatever is in your job role. And I think it's sometimes lost in those big companies and institutions that you can't engage your heart, sometimes even if you want to. And it's very much head-driven and data-driven and finance-driven and so on. And I think we fall into that trap. And I do think that probably ends up causing illness. Because that's where the stress comes from, and you're doing things that are against actually your feelings. I've been healthier, without a doubt, since I left full-time employment, employed by somebody else, and started doing my own thing. Yeah, well, that says a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's exactly why. I think because everything is so ego-driven in some companies, and when you're a very empathetic person, when you do live from the heart, you put your heart on the table and somebody stamps on it, it hurts. And I think that's for me, one of the big things is that I'd give of myself and I was made to feel like that still wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and that's why this weekend's been so nurturing, I think, because we've all come together, and many of us not knowing each other and not having met before, but we all understand each other.
Absolutely.
And whilst all those technical issues and things that I've found, I think, Rachel, you've done a marvellous job. You've pulled all these people together and you've made this event happen. And I understand what you're saying about there's always that, it's a bit of an imposter syndrome, isn't it? That maybe it's not me, maybe I'm not good enough, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And actually, sometimes you have to have the courage and you just jump in there and you do it. And you get a little team around you. And we all help and support each other on that journey.
Yeah.
So, isn't that Louise saying something else? The heart is generally seen through a head-based rational lens, valuing equally the knowledge arising from the heart and the head. Absolutely, 100%.
And I think, I do believe that's the way things are going. And I hope that I think I said in my session, a couple of sessions yesterday, about we've got to learn from this last year. We've got to, I'm going to come back to the Demeter principle actually, and take advantage of the fact that we've had a year to get used to that things have been awful and that things are never going to be the same again. And like Demeter did she missed her daughter for 6 of the year, so she allowed herself to allowed the earth to die, and then when the daughter came back, she allowed the earth to flourish again. And I think for me, I want this time to be new and different and more heart-centered. I think we've got to move forward from the heart, and the people that are ruling with their heads and their egos, they think that they've got it right, and I think we need to rise up as a as people say, no, you've got it completely wrong. Yeah.
There's no answer to that, is there? I mean, absolutely.
No, there
yes.
isn't really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think
So
that's a beautiful conclusion.
This is it. This is the start of what we're
conclusion
going
of
to do.
this session. Yes, no, yeah, absolutely.
We're going to rise up.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, that's been great, Josie. I know it's been a bit stressful, but I hope you've enjoyed being part of it, and I'm in the fact that there's such a lot of, I don't know, seems like synchronicity within the group of people that we've got together as well. Yeah.
Oh, we've got someone standing up for the head.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's
at 3 o'clock.
Perfect. Yeah, because that's exactly what Sharon's here to do. Because Sharon's here to do the sort of mind bit of it. So yeah, it's
fabulous.
I mean, you probably have noticed that there was no sort of accident about the way that these talks and workshops have been. This is exactly my change curve that I went through yesterday. This is exactly getting to the bottom of that, pausing, and all the steps to make your way out of the other side. And each one of the people that have spoken have added to everything that I was in about getting out the other side. So yeah, we're nearly there. And Sharon, I'm not sure whether you saw my session yesterday, but for me, this is the point. Your session is the point where it's here, the intuition, the insight, and the knowledge. That's where it can all fall apart and you slide back down into the change curve, and you might have to start again. So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, can't wait. I'm going to run and get a coffee and be back for 3.
Excellent. Thanks again, Josie, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.